Hello. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Uh, it's a truth already. I'm so happy and fortunate to have you here in Bucharest. We are so fortunate to have you here. So thank you. Thank you, firstly, to Rezidența Nouă, Suzana, Sorin, Vlad, everybody here, the team. Thank you, Scena Nouă. Thank you, Cărturești, who made this possible. And the most important, I want to thank to my guardian angels, which are Sean Cutter and Monica Kure. Without her help, we wouldn't have Will here today. So thank you all. Thank you very much. Monica and myself are very happy that the book published by Deep Vellum, who was 2 days ago already reviewed in New York Times in very, very beautiful terms, it is in Bucharest, and we're going to have a launching for it tomorrow at 5 o'clock in Cărturești, Verona. So this is the newest translation from the Romanian literature. Tatiana Țăbuleac, The Summer My Mother Had Green Eyes, but is not the only translation that Monica did already. Monica is an extraordinary poet, writer as well, and also a translator of 3 books of Liliana Koropka, awarded with Weidenfeld, one of them, Senses Notebook, the second one after Kinderland, 7 Stories as a publisher, and the most recent one also shortlisted for the Warwick Prize, To Greater Sky. Liliana Koropka, all of them. So, with no further introduction, I will just, this is for you, Slav. Slav is part of the Deep Vellum history and team right now. This is more, I will create a dramatic kind of stage for this beginning of I'm with the dark part in this discussion. Monica is responsible with the light. Yeah. I'm the dark. So I'm creating,
stuck in the middle here, on earth, looking at heaven and below.
what should we know, and not bore with explanations, Will, what should we know very shortly about the American market? We definitely know that 90% of the things published in US are published by five big companies, big publishers. So they select not only the manuscripts that are printed, which are printed, but also the printing itself, the distributing, the marketing, and so on, and so on, and so on. From everything that's published in US, only 3% are translations from other languages of the planet. So, and in the moment 2013, when Deep Vellum opened in Dallas, a city of 2 million as population, there were just only 3 bookstores. 1 of them independent and 2 of them chain bookstores. So this is the moment in which this human being here decided to open Deep Vellum. So this is the dark part. The light part of the introduction is Monica's.
Yeah,
Please,
I think
Monica.
it's so important what you're saying, Vlad, to set the stage, because when we think about, the U.S. As the literary scene of the U.S., we have maybe in Romania kind of expectations that it's very different. It must be so much easier. It's such a big market, and to understand the kind of monopoly that big publishers have, and to understand why so little literature gets translated into English. That's really important to set that stage, and also really important to understand how Will Evans and Deep Vellum, they're in such a unique place when it comes to what they do and what they've already accomplished. So my light part is talking about, I really just want to highlight only 4 major things that they've done to really understand how special they are. So in the first decade since Will founded Deep Vellum as an independent nonprofit press in 2013, it became the largest U.S. publisher of literatures in translation, with over 1,000 books in 70 languages from 100 countries. Again, this is absolutely remarkable for the stage that Vlad just sent. And one of those, of course, is Solnoid by Mircea Cărturescu in Sean Carter's translation, and it was the winner of very important prizes such as the Dublin Literary Award and the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. So that alone, we could stop there. We could talk only about that. But then to continue, really as a press, what's also amazing is the way that they've expanded their catalog and reach. So this is visionary. Deep Vellum acquired several other independent and celebrated publishing houses and continues their catalog, which also includes other Romanian writers. So that's the second thing. We could also spend all evening talking about that. But the third one is in partnership with the owners of the Wild Detectives bookstore, which opened in Dallas in 2014. He's rightly, I'd say, perceived by many as the catalyst of what had never really existed before, and that is the Dallas literary scene. And Deep Vellum also brought, and this really blew my mind when I found this out, brought the prestigious UK-based literary festival, the Hay Festival, to Dallas.
Wild Detectives did that, not us.
Well, I mean, but you're clearly a part of that scene. And it's the only U.S. location. Dallas, which barely had anything happening before this moment, is now the only U.S. location for that Hay Festival. So that's the third thing that we could talk about. And then the last, but definitely not least, is Deep Vellum also created several important public literary initiatives in Dallas. And these include establishing the Poet Laureate of Dallas program. They did not have a Poet Laureate of Dallas before Deep Vellum thought we needed one over there, which is much more common. I mean, the US has one, other major cities have one, Dallas did not. And then one of my personal favorites is when they published and distributed 30,000 free copies of a book on the history of segregation and racism in Dallas for a citywide reading initiative. It just completely blows my mind. So I thought we just needed to talk a little bit about how special Will Evans and Deep Vellum is. And we really now want to talk about the present and the future. I mean, we need to know about the past, and we can talk about that more, but we also want to hear about you now. So that sets the stage.
Thank you.
So, I will, if you let me, please allow me to put the first question in a sense. I will tell you just a few more words before. You said last night when meeting Mircea Cărturescu at Humanitas, for a few times, you said surreal, because it felt surreal to be in Bucharest and walking with Mircea on the streets of a city that you discovered actually through his eyes, his words, and so on. And after that, you said surreal when Lydia read a few lines from a journal of Mircea. So you are a character in one of his books. And surreal as well, this one was. This morning I was reading some little book by Edward Gorey. He was quoted one of the greatest surrealist painters, which is Magritte. And he said, inspiration is the moment when one knows what is happening. In general, we do not know what is happening. This is my important moment with Deep Vellum is when meeting in Anthony Frost's bookshop, Sean Carter, and he presented me this book, FRAME, by Magda Kernage, and I realized what is happening with Deep Vellum, because before Sean Carter, I didn't know exactly what's Deep Vellum. So, first question is, why do you do what you do?
Vlad, what a question. Monica, thank you for the intro. Vlad, thank you for the intro. Thank you to, I'm going to say the English words, Foundation 9, Residence 9, and to Cărturești. It is surreal to be in Bucharest. This is a city that only existed on the pages of Mircea Cărturescu's novels to me, but you're all real. And so I do keep turning every corner and hoping to find a butterfly in an elevator shaft. And I was on a television interview tonight, and I said, you know, it's amazing to discover a city that was only literature to me, and to be now a part of it, right? I'm part of Bucharest. Y'all are part of Bucharest, and we're all here doing it together. And that the only thing I hadn't seen that I really wanted to see was Bucharest detaching from the earth and starting to rise into the sky, you know, like the last page of those pages.
There's still time.
As she said, it does happen here every day. And I was like, dag, I keep sleeping through it, you know, like I need to set my alarm earlier. So it's a real joy to be here and to get to talk about literature on a serious level with you all, because you all are a super freaking literary town. Like, it's a super amazing, extraordinarily deep literary culture that I have gotten to step into. And there are so many amazing things happening here with writers and with translators, with really inspiring publishers, with the bookstore community that you have here, with this kind of level of cultural presentation. When I moved to Dallas, Texas, it was a city roughly the same amount of people, and it did not have any of that. And you have to ask why. Who is okay with that? And that's a question that, if you start to ask that question, you can get really angry. Why are people depriving me and you and us of what's possible? And I'm not the kind of person who likes to sit around and complain about things. I want to focus on what's positive and what is still to be done. And I got into all this business because I'm helplessly obsessed with Russian literature. And in Russian literature, you know the joke, those who do, there's only two questions in Russian literature: who is to blame and what is to be done? And so if you take that and use it as some inspiration, they are to blame, and what is to be done is we're going to get together and fight back against the problems that we have. And I'm also from a state in America, in the South, called North Carolina. And I grew up in a small city on the beach. If you ever saw the movie Blue Velvet or the TV show Dawson's Creek, that's my hometown. That's where I'm from. And just like Blue Velvet, it's a little freaky, but it's also very far away from everything else. And I had never left America growing up. And like most Americans, I grew up only speaking English. And so crippled with this kind of ignorance that's rooted in a culture that does not engage much with the world. America exports culture at this stage, and I wasn't getting a lot of foreign culture, but I didn't want to be in my small town and my small mind forever. And so why I do what I do is that I wanted to meet the other. I wanted to meet people I couldn't otherwise. I read a book by Maxim Gorky when I was 14 years old, and all of a sudden I felt very small. And I was reading about a history I knew nothing about in a style that was completely different than anything I had read before. I did not read one of his major works, and it's kind of funny, but the book that changes your life doesn't have to be the best book, but it was something I had never seen before. And this is the kind of thing, why we do what we do, is that I want to find those things that I've never seen before. I want to talk to people I couldn't talk to before. And so that's an author, that's another reader, that's another city, that's another culture, that's another language. Like, for me, Romania might as well have been the moon when I was growing up, right? I'm not like most Americans. I can look on a map and tell you where Romania is, right? But I didn't know much more than that. And so as I've grown through studying Eastern European literatures and cultures, and being interested in the differences between us, but not in a way that others, but in a way that unites us, and we can find the ways we come together. And literature for me is that vehicle. Just like there's song, just like there's food and drink, literature is a way we can truly connect. And that is why I do what I do.
I love that. And I love hearing your story of really how you became a reader. I think that's so important for us to not assume you either are or you aren't, and to tell those stories. One of the things we talk about here in the literary world in Romania is, one of the things is it's such a small book market. It's one of the, it's if not the smallest in Europe. People don't buy books on the level that we'd hope. So for you, do you think that you can actually make people love literature more? Is that actually something that we can do? And if so, how?
Hell yeah.
That's what I was hoping to hear, not going to lie.
Hell yeah, you can. And I don't really know the answer, but I will say that I'm into figuring out how. And that's the main thing, is good intentions and curiosity are very important. And also realizing that there's very little you can do alone, right? I cannot believe that Romania is the smallest book market in Europe. There is no way the book market here is smaller than Latvia. There is no way Iceland's got a bigger book market. I know everyone there writes a book, but there's only 300,000 of them, y'all. There's almost as many people in this neighborhood, you know? So, it's a matter of context, because in America we have 320 million people, right? That's a lot. That's a lot of people. Do you know how many of those bought a book last year? One book.
How many?
10%. All right, it's 32 million. All right.
In print, you mean?
In print, they bought a book, one book, not 10 books, one book. All right. How many of them bought 10 books? 1%, which is 3.2 million. Right. How many of them read books for fun last year? It's like 0.5%. So you're down to like, look, man, every country has a lot of problems, and reading is a problem for all of us. And so what can we do to make people love literature? I think a couple things need to happen. I think we need to smash the sort of elitist hegemony that we have over literary production and this idea that it is some kind of elite art, right? Literature is for everyone, and everyone can read at a high level if they are invited to the text, right? And I think publishers in America and everywhere in the world, you can start to only market your books to the same people over and over again, and you can fall into this rut of expectation that in America, you're going to publish these books. They're going to be sold in bookstores in only a certain number of major cultural capitals, and you're going to be reviewed in the New York Times. I go teach at universities now, and I ask my students every semester, have any of you ever read a book review in the New York Times? And so far, I've been teaching for 3 years. I've been teaching now 200 students. 0 have ever read a book review in the New York Times. So no offense.
Oh, it's good
You know what I mean?
perspective, yeah.
So like, who loves literature? I don't know. People who read the New York Times do, but they're not the only ones. So how do we get this book in the hand of the students? They're 20, 21 years old. They're curious. They're engaged. They're busy. They're on their phones like we all are. I'm on my phone. I'm not saying kids are bad. I'm a kid, man. Like, we're all addicted to digital technology. So how do you play with that? And so publishers have to engage, and writers have to engage, right? And I'm not saying every writer has to go out on the street and invite people in. I know writers are loners. They're solo artists. You're not in it alone, even if you think you are. But you have to sort of present the art and treat it seriously, but not in a way that others the audience. This is something I talk about a lot, is this othering. And I don't know if this word translates to Romanian this way, but it's like building a wall between me and you. And it's something politicians like to do a lot. We have a lot of politicians in the United States right now. They're saying it's us and them. And one of my favorite singers from Gogol Bordello, this band, the singer from Ukraine, he has a line and he says, of course, there is no us and them, but them, they do not think the same. And I love that line.
Mm-hmm. Now, I hear your respect for the readers, so even, or the future readers.
Man, I'm a reader.
Yeah.
I happen to work in publishing, but I'm a reader. If I start walking around with publisher nose in the air, please give me a...
Publisher nose, that sounds like, a medical condition.
Truly. And it's like publisher nose is something that happens in New York, maybe because the buildings are all so tall, but they're all headquartered in New York, and they walk around with their noses up in the air, looking down on the rest of the country. And man, I've never lived in New York City. I'm never going to live in New York City. I don't want to live in New York City. And it's a great place to visit. But man, when you look and you think that these 8 million people that live there seem to know something more than I do, or you do, or the kid in this neighborhood, or this person who's never gone to college, they don't. We all got to figure out how to do it together. And then like that makes the entire society we're a part of, that we can feel fracturing. It can start to heal some of those wounds. I guaranteed.
So I think we are all readers here, but some of us are also booksellers. So
Me too.
exactly, some of us. So my next question would be something impossible, probably, and you're gonna hate. But what do you expect from an ideal bookstore?
I kind of expect Cut to Rest and Friends. You know what I mean? Like, that's my platonic ideal of bookstore. You walk in, it's a lot of Deep Vellum, Dalkey Archive, New York Review of Books. No, but I do. It is actually the ideal. So the ideal bookstore, I think the one thing Cut to Rest and Friends doesn't have, obviously, is its size, right? So it's the ideal because it's a community bookstore and it's very focused on its readership and the community. And I think you can do that at a slightly bigger scale. We do not do it in our bookstore either. Deep Vellum has a bookstore. It's very important for us not to only publish. We have to do more. If we want to invite readers in, we have to realize that we have to be a bookstore. We have to be a cultural presenter. We do events like this in our bookstore, but we also go do events like this at venues throughout the city of Dallas and throughout the country. This is part of my job speaking to you today, right? This is about strategy. This is about building new connections and new partnerships. So the ideal bookstore does that. It says selling books is only one way we engage with the community we're a part of. And a bookstore must invite new readers in the same way they're like, when you travel to a new city, How many of you pull out your phone and Google bookstore and see what's around, and you go look at the bookstores in the city? That's how I travel, right? That was only 10 of us, you know what I mean? Most people don't. And so how do we reach those other people? How do we reach the readers that are like my cousin in Maryland who's a plumber? You know, when he travels, he goes to the beach and he doesn't read. And I'm like always thinking about my cousin, the plumber, and I'm like getting him an audiobook subscription for his birthday this year. Like, please, while you're digging around in the pipes, listen to a book. You know, you got a chance, and we'll see what we can do. But a bookstore has to just be more than a space to sell things. That's my ideal bookstore. Anything you do outside of that is vital. It's about the cultural presentations. It's about the community partnerships. And it's about trying to find something more than purely the transaction. Because the term bookseller is not fully representative of what the curation and the community building and the marketing that booksellers do for books is extraordinary. And when you put all that together, booksellers are really this vital piece in the dialogue that happens between the reader and the writer. That's extraordinary. And that's the ideal bookstore, has booksellers in it that are thinking at that level too.
Yeah, and I just have to give Vlad a shout out here because Vlad, you are my ideal bookseller. I mean, tonight is happening because you are that ideal bookseller that creates that community space at Cărturești and Friends. Every time I go in there, there's someone interesting. There's some interesting conversation to be had. So I don't know. I'd be curious for you. I mean, how would you? It sounds like it's more of a scale thing. How would you make that bigger? Could you make that bigger, or is it just you're the magic?
I did already with Anthony first because it was twice bigger. When I met, for example, lots of people from here. We've met there, and Michael was there since the beginning, and everybody almost here knew Anthony Frost as well. So the community just was part of the community, just traveled from Anthony Frost to Cărturești and Friends because we did that, and he did that in 2007. So it was completely a different time, you know, before the crisis and before pandemics. Yeah, exactly. So it was much easier to do it then, and the moment was ideal for Romania because we just it says dreamer. We we were just joining European Union, so it was a good moment for trade and importing UK or US books, you know, here. So the community seemed larger in a sense, but I would go if I would have to start again, I would do it. Yeah,
I love that.
Scale,
And
yeah.
I feel like
I'm more encouraged. This final session of FRAME10 program of this year is encouraging me. I mean, I wouldn't imagine that in 2007 that I will meet Will, because Deep Vellum wasn't there, but I was in some terms I was successful from the beginning because, for example, one of the publishing houses that you in the presentation you said was bought by Deep Vellum is Dolki Archive. We have the books here, some of them. One of my favorites, and Will can testimony about that, is Helen DeWitt's Your Name Here. So this is a great publisher, which practically Will also took the torch from John O'Brien and Dolki Archive. And I've met John O'Brien, and I've met because he was curious enough to know who is crazy to order 2,000 books of Dolki Archive in 2008 in Romania, because we were, how he said this, I quote John O'Brien, is the second stock in the world after Uppsala Library. So I was encouraged because of these meetings.
Yeah.
And the other idol that was I've met in London Book Fair since the beginning was Naveen Kinshore with Seagull Books, who Will just visited in Kolkata a few weeks ago or something like that. So we have the same, is like I've told Will when I've met him, is like we share the same ideas, and we feel I felt like meeting a buddy from high school, even though I would like to have still the age of Will, but
You can grow a mustache.
and
So, yeah.
Will started off by saying his ideal bookstore has Deep Vellum and all the Deep Vellum books.
Yo, man, if you have a bookstore in 2026 and you don't have a Deep Vellum or Dolki Archive book, you ain't no fucking bookstore, man. Come on, that's insane.
It's kind of true, but Vlad, you're able to do these miracles of actually stocking the books, and you think about the reader in terms of, who are you getting the books from, at what price? Because I've had, and we've talked about this experience. I've gone to Latvia, I've gone to Lithuania, and like I wanted to read their books in translation in English. And maybe I found a few, and they were twice as expensive as the cover price, which you're very aware of. You want to make sure that doesn't happen.
You know what I love more is that sometimes Will is describing Deep Vellum himself as what he constructed as a window to the world, and this is how I'm telling about the bookshops I've been in, as I'm thinking of them as windows to the world. So this is interesting because we we have this problem of percentage of translations in our countries, is very interesting, but we are relating to this phrase of windows to the world. This is important, I think, for publishers and booksellers all around the world, and about the otherness.
Yeah, I kind of want to offer like a Concorde jet to the world. Like, let's go, open up the pages, and you're all of a sudden in this whole other place. And it is. I just have to say, it's like anything we do at Deep Vellum, there's a family tree, as we say, and on it, Deep Vellum is on the same branch that Dalkey Archive started in 1982 or so. And when Dalkey Archive started its publishing, it had a revolutionary take on republishing books that were out of print and looking at international literature. And so John O'Brien really paved the way for a lot of the cultural relationships that we're able to be a part of, including working very closely with the Romanian Cultural Institute on translation subsidies, book tours for authors in the US and abroad. That kind of work it's all about partnerships and finding your partners. And it is, kind of bonkers to come to Bucharest and have an English language store like Cărturești, like in the middle of this amazing city, where across the street is another Cărturești that has a whole other vibe, and then it's also next to this academic bookstore that has a whole other vibe. And not every university in the world has that. The university in Dallas has a Barnes and Noble that sells more stuffed animals than books. It's not like it's something to really put in context. There's something very special about that energy that you're able to curate, and how that happens in a cost-effective kind of way, and also in that cultural interplay. That's vital. That is an ideal bookstore.
Get that to you, though.
Yes, and the Concorde jet that you just talked about.
retro.
If Deep Vellum is a Concorde jet, tell us about your crew. I think that's something that
I'd love to hear about the team.
Yeah,
because
the Deep
you
Vellum
always
team.
mention them. Yeah.
Well, obviously it's not a one-man show. It's never been a one-man show. And so I do love to talk about the Deep Vellum team. And remember, the Concorde jet was grounded because it was dangerous. And so I'm out there. I'm dangerous. And so you gotta have some people who keep it grounded. And so Deep Vellum's team includes our board of directors. Deep Vellum is a nonprofit organization. So it's still a corporation. It's still run like a business. And so we have a board of directors. Slav Gabinski, who's here in the audience tonight, is on our board of directors. One of my oldest friends. We've known each other more than half our lives. Went to university together, went to the same graduate school. And just, we share a vision for culture and how it works in the world. And so our board of directors are part of our team. And then the actual people who do the work that you know of. Again, something I mentioned that's important about Deep Vellum is that we don't just publish books. So we are set up as a cultural presenter, a cultural organization. So we if you think about Deep Vellum, we call it Big Deep Vellum, because then under that, we publish books, and then we have a bookstore, and then we do literary events, and then we do advocacy work, and then we do education work, and then we do strategic initiatives. 6 completely different things with very, very little overlap between what they do on the day-to-day basis. So if you think about it, we're doing the work of a Humanitas, right? Where we publish books and we have a bookstore. But then we also have to go to the city and say, you should give grants to literary organizations and writers. And so we petition, this is advocacy work, so then we petitioned for years, and the city of Dallas now funds literary organizations like ours and writers as artists, and other foundations do now too. So we're creating a culture of value around the written word and the published word, which is very important to building a sustainable literary ecosystem in our city. And then that's in addition to doing the literary programs. We obviously, in our little bookstore, which is not much bigger than Cărturești and Friends. It's actually, the original store was the same size. We then doubled it to have some office space. In that bookstore since 2015, just over 10 years, we've had over 900 events in that store. And so we've had huge authors and we've had authors you'll never hear of. We've had theater, film, comedy, tons of concerts. Does anyone know Waxahachie, the folk rock group? I love Waxahachie. She's one of my favorite singers. She played there once. She plays arenas now. You know what I mean? Like we had Tyemba Jess, one of the great American poets. He did a poetry reading nearby and then came and did an after party in our store. He wrote a book of poetry about Leadbelly, the famous blues singer. Leadbelly has his historic plaque on our building because he used to live in the neighborhood. And he came, so Tyemba Jess came to the store, read from his book of poems about Leadbelly, and then played the Leadbelly songs on his guitar. And then he went home the next day and won the Pulitzer Prize the day after that. So like, it's like, that's cool. But it's also cool to have writers you've never heard of. And how it all kind of comes together in a space where literature is at the core, but it's part of a larger cultural fabric. And then events in the city, we've hosted another 900 or so events out in Dallas. And that's bringing authors we publish and we don't to schools and universities and museums and book clubs and charities and neighborhood services organizations. We created the Poet Laureate program. We kicked up a citywide book club for a book about a vital piece of Dallas history. And so when you put all that together and you see like, why do you do so much? Well, remember about what you said when I moved to Dallas, this stuff just wasn't happening. But what the city did have was these amazing resources of people and artists and individuals and individual organizations doing good work. And then when you start to put it together, you can really do a lot together. All right, so on the team, we have people who run all this different kind of stuff. And at Deep Vellum Publishing now, which is the main thing we're here to talk about, we have 6 imprints now. And imprints are all led by different editors with different visions and different sort of taste and different marketing and different curation. And so there's Deep Vellum is now an imprint of Deep Vellum, like Penguin is an imprint of Penguin, right? And that's kind of fun. And that's the original kind of Will Evans curated list. And then there is also Dalkey Archive Press. There's A Strange Object. There is Phony Media. There's La Reunion Publishing, which is just books about Texas. And then it's something we call Texana. It's a genre. It's the only state with its own genre in America, and we love that. And then there's our most recent acquisition is called Fum de Estampa, which is a British guy doing Catalan literature out of Spain, but not only Catalan. And so when you put all that together, you have a really robust translation list and a big backlist of titles that helps, as we all know who work in publishing, backlist is king. And so Deep Vellum started acquiring other publishers in 2019 as a way to build a backlist of books. Backlist gives you sustainable revenue in order to go do the front list work, the new books. And so as it's kind of come together, it's been an extraordinary amount of growth. And as we were building the backlist, our front list started doing different things than we had ever done before. It started like taking off into new levels. And that's been very exciting, but it's also brought different challenges. And so inside of our team, we have my colleague Sarah McCarn, who is our associate publisher and rights director. We have running the bookstore side of things is my colleague Riley Rinhack, who is just absolutely extraordinary and who has always helped me with the messaging side of what we do, just like a sounding board for ideas. And I remember when she first got hired, I'll tell you too, we were going to close the bookstore during the pandemic, right? It was like, man, there's just no reason for this bookstore to exist. Like, who knows when we were closed for 2 years. And why be here? We're just going to go put the publishing house in some cheap location and we'll just publish books like New York people do, in an office. And I was really sad about it and I was going to do it. And then Riley came to me and was like, that would be a really stupid idea. And I was like, yeah? And she's like, yeah, I'll do it. And I was like, hell yeah. And we did it. And it's been the greatest thing ever since Riley came in too. But it was like, there was this period with the pandemic when we had to sort of question the way we were doing things. And so we came out, we did things differently on the other side. And it's been very extraordinary. And Riley one day asked me a question when she first came on. She said, all right, Will, here's a question for you. Is Deep Vellum a writer first or reader first organization?
An excellent question.
Yeah, I was like, hey, this is like a question y'all would ask me, and so I'm prepared. I was like, reader first, and she goes, good. If you had said the other thing, I would have punched you in the nose. Like, yeah, Riley, I know. And so it's like, but it's a mentality. If you serve readers first, what does that mean? Because it doesn't mean we devalue writers, but if the reader comes first, it means you treat everyone with a different level of respect in that relationship between the reader and the writer. And so that is a unique thing about Deep Vellum. And so then we have booksellers, like my colleague Abby, who's amazing. And Abby's a cool story because she started as a student. I taught at one of the universities, and she was a rock star student. And then she did an internship with us, and then she got hired on to be a bookseller. And she's just growing and growing. And she goes, and she's like our youngest colleague. She's like 22 years old. Is anyone here 22 years old? Have y'all talked to a 22-year-old recently? I did not think there was such an age gap between 42 and 22. And you start talking to a 22-year-old, man, she sees the world differently. And it's what we need. like diversity on staff is like, age diversity is super important too. And so it's been super fun. And then, of course, I have amazing colleagues who help in production. Linda's our production manager, which is controlling the flow of the text from a Word document through the printed book. And then we have amazing editors. Walker is now our editor at Dalkey Archive. He used to be our publicist, and then we transitioned him into being an editor at Dalkey Archive. He's going to oversee the American Literature series, which we're revamping, which is kind of exciting for Dalkey, in addition to some of the other authors like Helen DeWitt and Ilya Gridneff, who did this book, and like Vladimir Sorokin and others. My colleague Jill Myers has the A Strange Object imprint, which got us our first National Book Award finalist this past year. North Sun. And Jill's out of Austin. Walker's in Brooklyn. Sarah's in Brooklyn. Linda's in Dallas. So we have an office in New York, and we have an office in Dallas. So I just complained about New York, but we have to sort of engage in New York. It's a necessary evil. And then we have a couple marketing colleagues, including my colleague Sarah Forbow, our publicist Nadine. Sarah's in Dallas. Other Sarah's in Dallas, and Nadine is in Brooklyn. And then we have a fundraiser, Katie Lemieux. She writes grants all the time, so like all she does. And she also owns a bookstore in a suburb of Dallas. That's extraordinary. And that's kind of the core team, like right there. And then we have some part-time and full-time equivalent kind of colleagues, including a guy named Kirby who does all of our typesetting in Kentucky. And then we have a guy named Doug who does Fum de Stampa editing, and he also does Dalkey Archive production. He's in Spain. Yeah, there's a heck of a lot more people who really make Deep Vellum happen, but it's kind of fun to give them all a shout out and like sort of piece together what
it's
this thing
so
is.
great. And I think it's important to get that bigger view of what a team actually could mean as these kind of concentric circles that keep expanding. And I really love the point that you made about reader first. And I think that's why your team is so big, because the readers, like we're all readers, even the writers. That's where we start.
It relates with this, and I know Monica is not going to put the question, but I have to, because it's so important, I know. But let me know, how do you see in what you do the relationship with the translator, because it's so meaningful for the Deep Vellum
Are we
team.
on the team?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes and no, you know what I mean? Yeah, we're in it together, but the relationship's a little different, you know what I mean? It's a different type of contractual relationship. But it is something where like a publisher and a translator are like, when you team up and you do it right. We teamed up with a translator very early on named Emma Ramadan, who was early in her career. And she called me when I had the idea to do Deep Vellum, and she had been interning at Archipelago Books, another nonprofit press, who published Mircea Cortărescu's Blinding and Nikita Stănescu's Wheel with Single Spoke. And they just do amazing work. And so Emma was like, hey, I heard you're starting a translation press. I heard you kind of like experimental books. I'm going to translate this Ulipo author in my master's program in Paris. And I was like, done. And so it was one of the first books we signed. And we've worked with a lot of translators over and over, and it's really extraordinary. And it's really important to us for translators to be a part of the team, to make sure they're treated with extreme respect. Every time we publish a book, the translator's name is on the cover. All of our translators own their own copyright. They get royalties, and that's a really important way to build a sustainable business. And I bring that up because a lot of our peers don't do those three things, and that's something really important to us. And the most important thing for translators is that, I mean, they are the most important part of how we, as a publisher especially, acquire books, because Deep Vellum, as it was mentioned, has books from over 70 languages. I think technically we've done like these anthologies the last 3 years called Best Literary Translations. We actually haven't calculated the languages in there, but I think we're over 100 languages now, because it has like one story from, a language that we hadn't done before. So inside of that, if you have 70 languages, I guarantee you, if you asked 100 Americans, 0 of them could name 70 languages. You know what I mean? And so we do this because it's very intentional for us to make linguistic diversity, and that type of storytelling that can come from a different language and culture is very important to present to us. And so translators allow us access to those ideas and to those books. And so we trust translators. We've signed a lot of books. This is scandalous. We've signed a lot of books where I've never read a word of the book. But someone just said it's a good idea. And you have to put some trust in people sometimes, And with this book, Schattenfrau, which is here in the front in German, I had never read a word of it. No offense, I had not read a word of The Summer My Mother Had Green Eyes either.
Wait, but you made me do a trial.
We did, but I didn't.
Pages.
I wasn't the one. I read the Doki Archive stuff, but a Femme by Sean Cotter. I didn't read a translation sample, and that one was kind of fun because I was like, Sean, I wanna publish Solenoid by Mircea Cărturescu, and he's like, great. Then here's Femme by Magda Carnet, and I was like, oh, great. And so our Romanian literature series at Deep Vellum kicked off with Sean doing what he does best, which is expanding my horizons and our horizons as an entire reading culture. And so when you think about translators and how they fit in the fabric, like it's they're on the same level for us as our authors.
Thank you. You mentioned the other presses. Do you consider these, you talk about a lot of these different presses. Are they your competition, or what is your relationship to presses? And I think it's, that's important as we talk about the ecosystem. Obviously, there are many presses out there. How do you relate?
Yeah, they are our competition. Competition is good. You can be friends with your competition. You can have a respect for your competition. But I mean, we're not, for the books in translation especially, the competition is light. It's not like we're offering a lot more money than each other. There's a tier of exceptional publishers of international literature in English. New Directions is, of course, one of the most legendary, if not the most legendary. And then there are publishers like Grey Wolf and Archipelago and Open Letter Books, and it's these publishers were all in a pool, and that basically after Penguin Random House does not offer on it, then they send it to us. And that's insulting, but it's how it goes, And so inside of that, yeah, we kind of compete with each other. And of course, we're competing in the market itself, right? You can only read so many books a year. A bookstore can only stock so many books a year. And something interesting about translation is that all the books in translation that come out in English are very literary. And so there's only so much space for a literary in the market. The market is dominated by non-literary books, right? If you want to start making money with translation, translate any other genre than literary fiction and poetry. And so in the space of that, it's also, as it is competition, I want to publish the best books. I want to publish the books that changed my life, but I also know we cannot publish every book. And so by having a bookstore, we get to put all the cool books in there that we love by other publishers. And then we get to host events with them. Like, dang, we missed out on that book. Come on down, we'll launch it in Dallas. And they do. And it's an ecosystem. We support each other. And so, especially with that kind of mentality, I wish more publishers had bookstores in America. And I wish more cities outside of New York had publishers. And then I wish those publishers had bookstores. It would build a different kind of value connection between the publisher, the bookstore, and the public. We need a little bit of that. So I look with great admiration on places like Hub City, which is in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Right? This is a small city in South Carolina, and they're a nonprofit, started as a writers collective that evolved into a publisher, that evolved into a publisher bookstore. And it's an extraordinary space. And $2 radio in Columbus, Ohio, Milkweed editions in Minneapolis. We're all looking in the shadow of the greatest American publisher bookstore, City Lights, right? City Lights is that's the platonic ideal of bookstore, to be quite honest with you. Yeah. It was founded by the Beat poet Lawrence Ferlinghetti. They publish books, and they do a lot of international literature, and they have great events. So when we brought Mircea, for example, to the U.S. on his tour in 2023, when Solenoid came out, we said, Mircea, will you come to the U.S.? He goes, yeah, I can come around this time. I'm very busy. And he said, I will come if I do City Lights. I will not come if you do not book City Lights. Okay, so we called City Lights. Like, can you do it? And they're like, this is the one day we can do it. And so we did the whole tour around City Lights.
Did not know that.
And so Mircea did the event at City Lights. And for him, it's important because, as those of you guys know, he's obsessed with the Beat poets. And it's like such a vital part of his literary story. And he got to do this event there that was packed. I mean, like beyond shoulder, packed like sardines in a tin. And then there was as many people outside on the street listening as there were sitting in the room. And, that's a crowning kind of achievement for Mircea. He's had bigger crowds, but like for him to be in that space, and City Lights is it. That's a publisher that we are like in competition with, but we also share a distributor with them. We also have a bookstore. They also have a bookstore. And it adds this like really nice kind of competition that's very friendly and very respectful. And I love them. Like at the end of the day, we need more of that. And we need more competition because it makes us all better. And at the end of the day, again, if you fall into that complacency, that you start to expect that like, oh, If your bookstore doesn't have my book, Barnes and Noble, then it's the end of the world. And you're like, man, well, how cool is it that City Lights could have the book and Hub City could have the book and Milkweed, and it adds a different value proposition too. And then we're all supporting each other. And there is a term for this in American business school. For those who love business school, they call it co-opetition. You're cooperating together. Isn't that corny? But it's really beautiful.
so great.
Co-opetition.
Co-opetition.
I think one last question. Sorry, I was thinking to.
From us, we want to
From
give
us. Yeah.
the public.
We have to.
Think of the
Listen to
best
the-
questions ever, and I'll go
Yeah.
lightning fast.
It is important for us, for me anyway, is about being a non-profit organization. So sales are not the only point of interest for when you decide on a title or so. What's your vision on success for a book? If you what happens if you only sell one copy of a book?
Deep Vellum was founded as a nonprofit organization for a very specific reason, and that was because we wanted to do more than publish a book, and to do that in the American landscape of what we wanted to achieve. Being a nonprofit added a community-based approach that is very unique into solving the problems that I thought our society faced. And so being a nonprofit in America is about filling gaps, right? Which means that corporations have gaps. They leave gaps in society. And so nonprofits come in to fill it. And everyone looks at me in Europe and they're like, what? And you're like, a university is a nonprofit. A hospital is a nonprofit. So the Museum of Art is a nonprofit. And you're like, oh yeah, this makes sense. So Deep Vellum is a hospital for the soul. And Deep Vellum is a university for the mind, right? And then it is all these kinds of different levels of engagement. And I joke a lot, but I am serious. I promise. There's like a point. And so to engage in a nonprofit way is about flipping the script on what success for publishing is and how it's defined. Because if it's not enough to publish it, then you have to do something more. What is the something more? And so sometimes I have used the example of it's worth it sometimes to sell one book just so long as the book exists. It's a success. And the reason for that is if we had not done the book, it would never come out in English, because there is no profit ever to be gained by the book, but it is a work of art that deserves to be read and discovered by readers in the English language. And a great example of that is this poet we published this past year named Conceição Lima. She's from an island nation called São Tomé and Príncipe. And if anyone in here can find São Tomé on a map, you get the gold star for the day. Most people in America definitely have not heard of it, but it's south of Nigeria, just south of Nigeria in the sea, and they speak Portuguese. It's the language of the colonial past. And Conceição Lima is a major poet from there, and we would never have discovered it without the great work of our former phoneme editor, the founder of phoneme and translator, David Shook. And Shook is a unique figure. When they founded phoneme, it was focused on smaller languages and cultures and persecuted languages and cultures. That's a unique way to pick books. And when they started at the same time as Deep Vellum, and there were things I wanted to do at Deep Vellum that I realized I couldn't do because they were doing it, and they had the contacts in that world. So they published books from Uyghur, right, which is the persecuted minority of Western China, the Muslim minority. They published books from, here's an example. We did a book from Democratic Republic of Congo, translated from French. It was the first book ever translated by an author from this country in English. Well, the next year they published a book by an author from the same country, translated from Lingala, one of the indigenous languages of the region. And I was just like, damn, that's cool, man. I was like, they did a book from Esperanto, they did a book from Yiddish. They did Oleg Wolf from Moldova, who wrote in Russian. And I'm like, they published Mario Beatin from Mexico. They published dozens of indigenous writers from Mexico. And I was just like, this is my favorite. It was my favorite publishing project going. And then they called one day and said, would you take this on? I said, yeah, if we could keep it going. And we worked it out. And so phoneme kept going. And eventually Shook got a National Endowment for the Arts translation grant, which is a big cultural honor in the U.S., to translate the poetry of São Lima. And all right, so all that time goes on. We publish the book. And when we publish a book of poetry in translation, we do it bilingually, or trilingually sometimes. But in this case, it was bilingual. It was Portuguese on one page, English on the other. And I had an introduction from Shook about who this poet is, why you should read it. And it came out, and like most books of poetry, it did, sales-wise, like one copy, right? It's more than one, but not much more than one. You know, if on The Price is Right, you get this reference. On The Price is Right, it's like $1 is the bet, and you'll win. So the book comes out, and you know, the hope is it's going to find its readers over time. We're promoting it through all of our channels, but poetry and translation is hard. And then the translator Shook lived in Northern California, around San Francisco, and they have a book awards called the Northern California Book Awards. And so Shook said, let's submit to the Northern California Book Award because they have a translation category. So we submitted, and the book won. It won the Northern California Book Award for translation, right? Shook called me and said, Sal is crying back in Sao Tome because she was having a hard time with money, and this prize got her recognition from the government of the country, and she's now on a pension for the rest of her life, and she's recognized now formally as the national artist of Sao Tome and Principe. And you're like, hell yeah, one sale worked, man. It did it. But that's what it's all about. It's about so much more than just selling books. But who would publish this book without it? And we have to have this door of cultural flow happening. And if you're not a nonprofit, there is no incentive. Why has the CEO of Penguin Random House never sat here? There is no incentive to engage with the reading public. And I just refuse to live alone in any kind of tower that doesn't engage with the reader on an eye-to-eye level. If I'm a publisher and I'm in a position of power, then I have to listen to people who know more than I do so that we can do what we do better. So I know you guys know more than I do, and I would love to answer any questions about that. Thank you guys for those great questions.
Thank you so much, Will. Thank you, Monica. So questions, but both of the invites, of course, from the pub. I know there are some. Yeah, please. Emma.
Hi, it's so exciting to have you here. I was following Mircea Cărtărescu's tour on social media, so it was really, I saw at the City Lights. I have a question for you because I guess you've learned even more these days because that, you know, the Romanian literature nowadays, fiction is really amazing at the moment, and we see it more on the international arena. But my question is, and of course we want an honest answer, and as comprehensive as possible. What could our cultural authorities and stakeholders do more to get these amazing books that we are having now to you, to other publishers, and so on? So any feedback, it would be really useful.
Is she a plant? That's a good question. That's a real. This is a, yeah, it's a really good question. And so to start, there is a moment happening in Romanian literature right now. It seems like a golden age. I don't know if this is true, but it is definitely true in the English language. Romanian literature has arrived in English. There's an expectation that when the books come out, they are nominated and winning the major awards in the world. Right? This is new. This was not happening before, and so it's something to celebrate. So something is working inside the system. When you talk about the authorities and the resources that are there, and one program that has done a lot to help with that. I met yesterday with the Romanian Cultural Institute, your director, Mr. Jikman, and the director of the National Book Office. And the program is called TPS, and it's a program to support Romanian literature in translation into many languages of the world. Deep Vellum has received so far grants for FEM and Solenoid from this program, and if your government passes the budget in a couple weeks and gets support, we hope to apply for the same program for the translation of Theodoros that we have coming later this year. And it is a huge part of our willingness and ability to do the work in translation, especially from Romanian. I will say too, for Tatiana's book, we applied for this new, I think it's a new program, right? The first year, is your mic on anymore? the first year is a new translation program like that from the Republic of Moldova, and we received a translation grant of support for The Summer My Mother Had Green Eyes, which is extraordinarily generous, and it's amazing to see these, obviously these countries that share so much culture, being able to do this. And so inside of that, something is working. The TPS program was created 20 years ago. And I think something that I encouraged the Romanian Cultural Institute to do yesterday was you need to catalog your success, and you need to brag about it very publicly. You need to put it on social media. You need to make really cool 21st century graphics to engage with people on Instagram and TikTok. And you should make billboards in the city that say, you saw Will Evans' mustache face? He's here because of our program. The success of Solenoid is because of the program. The success of Summer My Mother Had Green Eyes is because the Spanish publisher applied for that program. And it is now their best-selling book in Spain, right? So the Romanian government is investing in publishers to do something that they were not doing before. It is working. And you can do quite a lot with quite a little bit of money. It is not a gigantic budget line item in the government. And so if you had more money in there, the question would be, what more would you want? Because something is working, right? Liliana Korobka's books that came with 7 stories.
She's here tonight.
What? Oh, what an honor. Oh my gosh. Okay. It's so cool when you meet an author you've read before. You're like, she's real. Gosh. Did they get Romanian Cultural Institute support?
You know, the first one did. The Censor's Notebook, I believe, did. At least there was an application. So I think, you know, it's also meeting halfway. You know, the publisher, I think, needs to be willing to risk.
Yes.
And to go on a limb, and maybe just that, you know, that little amount of money is going to make them maybe like push them over the edge if they're already looking at
Absolutely. It's like if the cost of the book is 100, right? The translation grant would be like 5 to 10, but it's enough to make a decision sometimes between doing a book or not doing a book. For us, we're crazy, so we're kind of already leaning translations, but and we're a nonprofit, so if we don't get a grant for the translation, we will go ask someone else for money too. Individuals, foundations, governments, corporations, rich Romanians, if y'all know any, send them my way. We can do a lot together, is what I'm saying. It doesn't take a lot of money to change the world. And
we need to emblazon that on something.
Put it
doesn't
on.
take a lot of money.
Vote me. Let's go and send me a royalty.
This is the motto for the publishing industry.
So the next thing would be like, what more can you do? And so something amazing about Romanian Cultural Institute is the local ones that are out in the world bring authors frequently, and they bring lots of cultural figures. They bring filmmakers and dancers and musicians and yada yadas. And it is rare though in places like Dallas to get this. It usually happens in New York and Washington D.C. and Boston, occasionally a Chicago, occasionally somewhere on the West Coast. So when you live in Dallas, you're like very far from the cultural capitals. And so it was cool that we were able to work with the Romanian Cultural Institute on a translation grant for Solenoid out of Bucharest. But then we worked with the Romanian Cultural Institute out of New York on a tour, right? And we had an event with the Romanian Cultural Institute in New York, but we also had a public event because we don't ever want to only market our books to Romanians, right? And I was asked this question on TV tonight, right? How do you market Romanian literature? And it's like, well, you know, we take a good book and we tell people about it, but the fact it's Romanian is secondary, right? Because when it's in English, it's a book in English, and we can celebrate the value without diminishing the original. But we're not ever going to put Romanian literature into a ghetto, ever. We refuse to do that. So when you look at the resources that you have from the Romanian Cultural Institute, there's much to be grateful for, because 20 years before that, there was nothing coming out, right? It was exclusively an academic interest. And so now that wall has been broken down. And so with a little more investment, you can do more to encourage writers of all ages, of all generations, to continue to make the connections to publishers who are not doing this work yet, because it is not coming from the big 5 right now. It's coming from independent and small publishers in every country. And so you still need to crack, I hate to say it, the big 5 needs to publish some of these authors. Not Mircea in the US, not Tatiana in the US, but Mircea is now published by Penguin in UK. That's a huge step up for Mircea. One small step for Mircea, one giant leap for Romanian literature, right? That's a serious moment. And so when we're in talks with them, I hope it finalizes by the time this goes live, to publish Theodoros in the UK when we publish it in the US, which would be the first time they do like a new Mircea, which would be huge, right? And it's kind of putting them on the level of the classics, the modern classics. And so those connections to publishers around the world are great. And I think something I encouraged them to do yesterday was to look at the example of South Korea. as much as you can. It is an example of a small country, putting that in quotes, I don't believe in this, but a small country that put a huge initiative together to say our culture is going to be the leading culture of the world. And we are going to do it in every artistic discipline. And it means we are going to have, and then they said, success to us is we're going to win Best Picture at the Oscars. And success to us is we're going to win our first Nobel Prize, right? And success is we're going to have the biggest band in the world. So with huge investment from South Korea, the biggest band in the world is BTS, right? Parasite won Best Picture at the Academy Awards in the United States. The first and only foreign film to win Best Picture, right? And Hong Kong was one of the first books translated, her vegetarian, by the translation support program that they created for that 15 years ago, right? They created it. It was one of the first translated, and then she won the Nobel Prize. Success, success, success. What we need in Romania is to define success at that level. This country deserves it. The artists are there. The readers are here. The culture is here. The history is here. There is no reason to think that Romanian is a small language or small country. And those in power need to realize it and start acting like it and think visionary. There's no reason to think that Romania is not the center of the world right now, geopolitically and culturally. I live in Texas, and you know about me? Like, you could turn Romania into the Texas of Europe, and you can do it easily. Put that on a billboard too. You hear that? Mr. President, do you hear this? Mr. Prime Minister, come down and talk to me. I got ideas. You should make it a business-friendly market, and you should bring the world here, and you should export this culture there. It is about being a crossroads. You are on the way from here to there, and by being the center of the world, you can put Romania where it belongs. And it's happening right now in literature, and it has a long way to go, because that's only a couple authors, but the door is open. And when the door is open, you invite your friends in, and that's what we're trying to do. So. Great question.
So,
I do hope the Prime Minister watches this.
I just want to add something because I've seen Philip here. Before Mircea Cărtărescu, one of unfortunately not living authors, was translated by Penguin, was Mihail Sebastian's journal and 2000 Years. And we have Philip, the translator of that for Penguin Modern Classics here. Philip.
An honor. I can't wait to meet you.
So, Michael, please.
You said you're addicted to digital technology.
Yeah.
There are some people who would argue at the moment it's very difficult to engage readers to read sort of large novels like Schadenfreude and Solenoid. What advice or opinions or have on how to engage more readers in reading books? I'm not saying particularly young people, that might be an argument, but what would you say?
Yo, that's a great question. First and foremost, let's go to where they are. You on digital technologies? Let's start at success. Things that are happening right now that are amazing. And my favorite example of recent memory is Book Talk. I don't have TikTok. I don't care. It's not how I engage with the world. I don't care about videos. If I'm on Instagram and a video comes up, I'm like on to something else, right? But I'm like a text guy, so Twitter was my medium. I'm dating myself. I'm old. But Book Talk last year, 2 years ago now, I don't remember what year it is, had a success story out of the UK that on Book Talk, some very young readers discovered a novella called White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And they went bonkers for White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky and made it a bestseller in the UK. Now, for those who've read White Nights, it's a beautiful, tender, touching love story, sentimental in a way other Dostoevsky novels are not. And something very beautiful happened, and young people said, how can this old, dead white guy speak to something that touches me? And it was a reminder that art touches all of us, no matter who creates it, that it's a universal, and that you can be here today, no matter who you are, and read Dostoevsky and love it, and that you can also be here today, no matter who you are and where you come from, and you can write the next White Nights. And it reminds me of the quote by James Baldwin, the great American writer, one of the best, who said 100 years after Dostoevsky, he said, "You think you are so unique, and your suffering and your pain and your love is so unique, and then you read Dostoevsky, and you're reminded that we're all in this together. All this stuff. I'm like a product of all this that comes before." Young people are getting this, and the young people are not the problem now. I think it's always been hard to read Schadenfreude. It will always be hard to read Schadenfreude. This is not meant to be a bestseller. Ulysses was never a bestseller. Infinite Jest is a different kind of case. It was created to be a bestseller, but it's still difficult to read. But there is actually a significant part of the population that is turning towards print books because they are reminded young and old, that's a type of close reading that you can't get on the screen. And then the science backs it up. And so I think for publishers, and especially for those who do literary kind of cultural work, is we just got to go to the people where they are. This is the first thing. And so if the people are on their phones, got to find a way to get to them on their phones and then get them off. And that's harder to do for old people like me than it is for young people. And it is harder to do for like the thing we have in America that's common is like when you look at the numbers of who does read, it is people reading one genre of book, right? Men of a certain type read only nonfiction. Women of a certain type only read romance, right? Men and women alike of a certain type read only sci-fi or thriller or fantasy or horror. And of course, we're talking about literary fiction. And you could be like, well, this has tinges of horror and all this. And they're like, ha, ha, ha. No, it doesn't have the cover. It doesn't have the genre cover. And so like 90+% of readers read one genre. And it is so hard to pull those readers out because they're converted to something else. And so something I always say at Deep Vellum is like, how can we invite people into our tent of literature, right? In which like literary quality and the international styles and all this is something very important to engage with. And so by going to people, we do that by going to like festivals, non-traditional venues, showing up, sending authors to those places, and putting on some kind of discussion, performance, show, putting poets together with novelists, together with visual artists, and then yelling about it a lot, about how important that is. And by defining it, kind of like we were talking about with the support program, by defining success is like, look, Dallas is a literary city, and by doing that, we're going to make sure that we do literary programs not only in the bookstores, but also in every neighborhood of the city. And there's 30 Dallas Public Library locations. And so it's a good way to map the city. And in those, you can look at zip codes that are the richest zip codes in America. And then in the same city, there are zip codes that are poorer than third world countries. And so that's the same city. That's America for you, right? And so we got to treat the reader in those two zip codes equally, and by going to them. And so we use vehicles like the library, we use vehicles like festivals, we use vehicles like schools and community festivals as a way to engage and bring the authors into those kinds of spaces. That invites people in. There's great success with that. And we're not the only ones doing this in Dallas or in the world. But then the next thing that we have to figure out how to do is to get books back into schools and to get the tablets and the computers out. But that's a much larger discussion. But to keep readers engaged from a young age so we don't lose them. In America, there's a statistic at 9 years old is when people stop reading for fun. 9. And the reason why is because at 9 is when the classroom starts to be divided between people who test well in reading and not. And then the books start having less pictures. And at 9 years old, if this is when it happens, my son is 9 years old right now. And so I'm setting up a pilot program with the school district of Dallas, which represents 1 million people, to pilot a few discussions asking 9-year-olds what they want. You ever ask a 9-year-old what they want? They don't know, but whatever they say, we're going to listen. And this is a problem we have all the time is like, no one ever asks 9-year-olds what they want. They're like, here, 9-year-old, take this crap. And like most kids' books, just like most fiction books, are crap. They're bad. They're badly produced. They're garbage. They're like not worth the paper they're printed on. And you expect 9-year-olds can sniff the...
You can say it.
I
You can say it.
No, I cursed earlier. I apologize. I shouldn't swear at events like this. I apologize. I get a little passionate, but they can smell the BS, and they can sense the artificiality. And so we should ask them, what do you want? What do you want to see more of? What do you want to create? What's your voice? And then you can do the same thing for readers everywhere. Do more surveys. You ever heard a publisher ask the public what they want? And I don't mean political books, but you know what I mean. Great question, though. And the question that keeps us all up at night.
And as we wait for the next question, I just want to once again highlight what you said. You just said so many interesting and good things. You said to do it, to get these, to go where the readers are and get that out and get them reading, but then also to broadcast that you've done it. And I think Deep Vellum is kind of then this hub where people can recognize each other, that they have a place to go to and congregate from and see each other as these new readers and as the readers of these books.
Yeah, I think something important is like I always talk about Dallas. It's where I live. And I talk a little bit of trash about New York. But when I say that, I don't mean the 8 million people who live in New York. I mean the people who work at those 5 publishing houses and only the senior executives, because the people who work there are cool and they publish some good books. Well, they publish a lot of books that are bad for democracy. But inside that city of 8 million people in New York, this is unique. I used to think that Deep Vellum was unique because we did what we do in Dallas And now I realize we're unique because we do what we do in America. And if we did what we do in New York, the city would be better and the country would be better. Every city needs this, and every city in the world needs it, right? Like, to keep the literary culture alive, you don't sit around and only read Eminescu. You read him and then you go write your own thing, right? And a lot of very smart people I've met along the way have this problem. They're the ones we need to convert to, because they're like, I had a woman do this at an event recently. She sat across from me and she goes, "We should only read the Greek classics." I was like, this is kind of like my ears started smoking. And I was like, it's insane that you know more about ancient Athens than you do about Dallas, Texas in 2026. I was like, Dallas could be the next Athens if you would pull your head out of your...
I think it's very nice to end on this note.
Come hang out and talk after. I know everyone's got more questions.
It's a good idea for all of us. Thank you once again so much, Monica, Will.
Monica, rock star.
And thank you, Residența Nouă, for hosting
Thank you, Resident.
this FRAME10 Cărturești. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It was a treat. I'm very thankful to Residența Nouă for making this FRAME10 edition and dedicated to the independent publishers in the world who are going in paradise, like it's written there. So, thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
Thanks, y'all. Oh, and tomorrow night, come
Tomorrow night, come at 5 p.m. at Cărturești Verona. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.